Hello and welcome to our Data Lab community webinar, Innovate and Thrive with Data-Driven Sustainability. In this panel discussion, we'll explore how to build thriving organisations that are good for both the economy and the planet, and how organisations are using data to tackle some of the world's most pressing global challenges. There are a number of ways of ensuring that your organisation is having a net positive impact on the planet, whether your focus is on reducing pollution and other harmful effects, maybe promoting biodiversity, or lowering or offsetting carbon emissions. There are plenty of ways to reduce harmful environmental effects from your organisation's day-to-day activities. And there are plenty of ways that the planet needs us to do just that. So I'm delighted today to welcome our panellists, Sara Roberts, who's the founder and CEO of Healthy Nibbles, and Adam Sroka, who's head of machine learning engineering for Origami Energy. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Pleasure to have you both. So we're going to start with some very basic background and a little bit about you and yourselves. And I would encourage that any audience members or participants to participate in the discussion by including any questions in the Q&A, and hopefully we can get round to incorporating those in our discussion. And that would really round out the discussion and make sure we're reflecting the views of the people who are watching. So to begin with then, Sara, could you start by introducing yourself? Tell us a bit about Healthy Nibbles and what you do day to day.
Yes, certainly. So let's say my name's Sara. I am the founder of Healthy Nibbles. And Healthy Nibbles really is set about to make sure that the healthy, sustainable food choices are the easiest ones to make. We particularly focus on B2B, so working with companies to support their employees and nutritional well-being and making sure that we do that sustainably. We feel it's a really, really important area because typically if you can change those behaviours and make sure positive eating is taking place in the workplace, then it's more likely to be taken at home. So it sort of has that sort of ripple on effect, which is really, really good.
That's brilliant. A great introduction. Adam, would you like to introduce yourself and Origami Energy for us, please?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Adam Schrocker. I'm a former data scientist, now working for Origami as head of machine learning engineering. And Origami is really a really interesting company. Our founder, Peter Bands, a good few years back, kind of foresaw that as the mix of renewables in the energy system reached a certain point, it causes quite a bit of chaos with the way things are modelled, and the volatility causes a lot of opportunity and risk for large energy companies. And so Origami is really about making that adoption of green energy much easier by empowering the predictability of these really volatile sources, connecting all the right data sources up and things like that. So Origami's, we're building a platform, a kind of one-stop shop platform for energy traders and large energy companies and energy providers, etc., to really make the most of their portfolios and optimize for green energy, to kind of usher in a bit of a green energy future. It's been a really exciting place to work because it's quite a big and complex, complicated problem.
That's a really good introduction, thank you. So both of your industries could be said to be part of what you might call the green sector. I'm not sure that's a term that's used generally, but I'm going to use it in this case, which is basically just the places where the actual business, the day-to-day business of an organisation is part and parcel of the move to net zero or reducing environmental impact. How do you feel what you do, Sara, contributes to our need to reduce our carbon emissions and, create a healthier environment for us all?
Yeah, certainly. So I think for us, it's about, right from the outset of creating the business, it was always about creating the least impact on the planet and the most impact with our supply chain and our customers and the sort of environment around us. So we're really looking at the entire operations of the business and how that can really be part and parcel of an education and experience process as we all move forward to have the least negative impact on the planet. I think how we contribute to this is really by driving demand from our supply chain. That's a really key thing for us. So we're looking for suppliers that really look at their impact, look at where they get their products, their raw ingredients from, what their packaging is like and things like that. So really trying to sort of stimulate that demand, which I think is has been a challenge certainly food and beverage industry, it can be quite often sort of skirted around from various different angles. So we really try and pursue that demand. I would say we pursue actively the clients that want to make a positive impact in their businesses. So again, sort of it's like that push-pull constantly. And I think there's an education element about what we do. So in terms of what we can achieve as a small business, too often I think smaller businesses feel that it's such an insurmountable problem that it's kind of sort of blinded by science or blinded by the size of the problem. So I think just being forthright about what we're actually doing and becoming sort of very transparent around what we're doing, the mistakes that we make, but also the achievements that we've actually done. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of different angles in terms of how we sort of drive this sort of agenda across the entire business.
And is there a particular way that you would think customers, people generally, should be changing their eating habits if they want to be more sustainable or to support a better environmental impact?
I think always for me, it's raw ingredients and choosing locally as possible. And there's a lot of contentious discussion around whether veganism is going to change the entire sort of ecosystem or not. And I think that is down to personal choice. But I do think if people are choosing to eat meat, then again, choosing to eat meat that's local, that's organic, that's, you know, grass-fed. Yes, there's cost connotations and all of that sort of thing in, but hopefully as that demand increases across, I think as the consumer demand increases across more products that are transparent, that's going to drive the demand. And I think as a consumer, choosing local, choosing small, choosing as natural as possible is going to make the world of difference. I think quite often when we're craving, shall we say, flavors and products that are coming from foreign countries and wider afield, it does have a massive demand, a massive impact on the carbon, because you're essentially creating that demand for shipping and logistics coming from much further afield than what we've actually got locally. And we're so fortunate and blessed in Scotland to have the most amazing produce, and in the UK.
Absolutely. I think one of the things we can easily fall prey to when it comes particularly to eating habits, you hear the discussion, is an all or nothing sort of approach. Yeah. You have to be vegan, but of course a little bit better is an improvement. If you don't want to cut out meat and animal products entirely, then just cut out meat. If you don't want to cut out meat, then just reduce meat. If you don't want to reduce your meat, then choose local. And there's a whole sea of ways you can make your eating habits better.
Absolutely, and just avoiding things, you know, simple things like food waste. We found we were going through personally, we were going through an awful lot of sparkling water, so we swapped to a soda stream. Yes, a little bit more expensive in terms of the initial outlay, but actually the number of plastic bottles then saved and not consumed because we're then moving on to glass. It's all of those things, and I think it's all about making those. I think with everything, start small, start with what you can influence. And that's the heartbeat that we've got at the business, but it's also something that I encourage with our employees as well. So do what you can, you know, and if you can't race in that direction, then fall in the right direction, but at least take some responsibility to doing something. And there's so many, you know, it isn't just about the cost thing, because you've got some awesome stuff coming out of, you know, places like Aldi that are doing cost effective. They've got a real local strategy as well. So there's an awful lot we can all be doing.
Absolutely. So let's talk about energy then, Adam. How do you feel that Origami Energy is helping to create a smaller environmental impact on the world that we live in?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And it's kind of, sometimes it comes across as a bit of a mercenary answer, I think, but strongly believe in doing right and doing good. But if you can make it more profitable for massive companies and banks, etc., to invest in green, then hopefully the problem just sorts itself out. If we turn around, if we can make it easier to adopt, for these companies to adopt these highly volatile, difficult to predict energy sources and incorporate them quite comfortably into their portfolios and make use of them and things like that, then actually the profit will just take care of itself and the money will take care of itself. So that's kind of but that's a huge ambition, right? That's a massive goal. It's really difficult, and it's not, I don't think it's something any one person is going to crack anytime soon, but contributing towards that overarching goal is really positive, I think. And then there's loads of other schemes that go on. There's things like vehicle to grid. You hear about all this stuff in the energy industry. So vehicle to grid, and there's always talk about, with the rise of electric cars, can we make use of the battery technology to act as like accumulators and store charge and things like that? That's again a really difficult problem that's taking time to solve. And organisations like Tesla are contributing into that market, but we've not sussed that yet. There's local schemes and councils like bus to grid is one that comes up a lot, and so there's lots of little things like that. And ultimately, if we can change the majority of our power sources for big industrial processes to green energy sources, then we're going to start to make large contributions to that change. On a kind of micro level, though, we do, one of our 3 core principles is green, so we try and do everything we can, and there are interesting things you can do. I think the shift to remote working has made a really big difference. I was one of the first sort of fully remote employees for Origami, because they're based down in Cambridge, but that kind of came about organically because of COVID and things like that. But we're doing that with more people now, and that's great. I haven't got a commute. I'm saving carbon and kind of energy expenditure there. And we have like a kind of a no-fly, sort of a no-fly policy. So we restrict flight because air travel can be quite sort of problematic for environmental impact. But if for any circumstance we have to, there's an organisation that we use that offsets your flight by planting forestry. And so every time anyone has to fly, a certain sort of activity is taking place to try and offset some of that. And there's things like that. My wife actually works as an environmental consultant as well, and she worked for an organisation that's been carbon negative for quite a few years, and they do lots of case studies, and there's some really interesting things that they do as well around like composting their own waste, and they have like a worm farm and things like that. So there's a whole heap of things, and you can go really, really far down the spectrum of this. But I think Sarah was absolutely right. Start small, do like one thing and trial it, and yeah, really try and make a difference to that, see if it works, and then start to scale that out and spread out to other things.
That's a brilliant summary. You covered a lot of ground there. That was great. So I'm going to pick you up on a little thing, because I've got a background in renewable energy. I used to work in the renewable energy industry, and you're talking about very volatile energy sources. That's a really interesting narrative I hear, because I don't see them as volatile. I see them as flexible and responsive. How do you feel that the way we talk about these things contributes to the problem or being part of the solution? Is that an important change, to say volatile versus flexible?
Yeah, and I guess it's where you're sat, right? So I'm very much in sort of energy trader or power company speak, because 30 years ago I could predict how much energy my gas power station was going to output, because it was directly related to how much gas I put in, right? And that was fine. And it's only as these flexible, these kind of unpredictable sources come in that causes that volatility. But the beauty of that is, and it's the reason there's so much, one of the reasons there's so much investment in green, is because there's a chance to disrupt these huge companies by going, well, actually, if you can't keep up and make use of these flexible energy sources, other people will. There's a chance for someone to invest a load of money in these sources and really start to make lots of profit. Where there's volatility and risk, there's opportunity as well, right? So yeah, I think flexible's interesting, and it's I suppose for what we believe, yeah, definitely the way we want to go forward and things like that. I think language is really important, but you speak to someone that used to do all their forecasting in Excel weeks in advance because it was really easy, they'll probably see it as a kind of, to their day-to-day, it's become more difficult to make use of. But that's hopefully something we can try and fix.
Click, sell, drag, forecast on.
Yeah, and now you've got to look at weather forecast, you've got to look at performance data and things like that, and it becomes, even timescales become really difficult to manage from a data point of view, as I'm sure you're aware, Joanna.
I've done a bit of work in that area, I have to say. I'm aware of its complexities. All right, so let's talk about data-driven sustainability then, because we've talked a lot about sustainability and different initiatives that we can be involved in, but it's interesting to bring data into the mix and think about what we're measuring, what we're counting, what we're tracking, and how that's part and parcel of the whole strategy. Sara, do you do very much with data and helping that to drive your sustainability efforts?
Yeah, so absolutely. We have just been fortunate. I say fortunate. We've just accredited as B Corp. We're kind of shell-shocked after it. No, it's a really great sort of accreditation scheme. So there has been an awful lot of data involved in that journey. I think for me, it's critical, is having data to back up what you're doing, where you are at the moment, and the journey that you're going on. The fundamental thing for me is actually around authenticity and the prevention of the greenwashing that's going on, where people stick on, where environmental sustainability suddenly becomes a key word. But it's actually, what are you doing and what are you measuring, and how is it, how are you improving? How is it progressing? And it doesn't mean to say you're always going to get it right, but I think you can see what you're actually doing and what impact that's being made. So we did our first emissions report last year. We look at, obviously coming through that B Corp experience, we've looked at a much wider range in terms of governance, employee, supply chain. We look at diversity and inclusion around our suppliers as well, location, modes of transport. We've done the whole works. And I am quite certain we'll have probably missed something. We'll have probably got something not quite right. But for us, it's a tool to show our starting point, essentially, is the information that we've released at the moment. And then we're doing that on an annual basis, both on our website and then obviously as we go forward to recertify for B Corp in the future. But I think data for me is the backbone of authenticity around what you're actually doing and being completely transparent about the journey and also showing what is possible. So absolutely.
It's an important part of measuring the impact that you're making as you make these changes, isn't it?
Absolutely. And seeing where you can, what changes are being made and what's having the biggest or the least amount of impact, and you can then direct your efforts accordingly. Because if there's something that's incredibly, I don't know, labor intensive and you've got an SME, but it's making such a margin, minor impact, then you might find there's another area that is maybe less labor intensive or less involved that makes a much bigger impact. So I think it is really important to sort of look at those. I mean, Adam mentioned about travel. Pre-COVID, I was flying to London nearly every other week. And then when you actually look at that in terms of the emissions, it is really, really impactful. So, that's one of the things that we've adapted to. COVID obviously was a trigger behind that, as well as going through this accreditation. But actually, tools like Zoom and things like that have made it so much easier to have those engaging conversations and actually make a substantial impact on our emissions output.
So it might be worthwhile going a little back a step and talking about what the B Corp accreditation is actually for. What is it encouraging? What kind of behaviours is it encouraging in organisations who sign up for it?
Ultimately, it's encouraging to be a business of purpose rather than just profit-led. It's not taking away the profit element of the business, and it is certainly encouraging, it demonstrates actually the more that you are sustainable, the more profits are actually made as a business. But in terms of going back to what the actual accreditation looks at, it looks at lots of different areas. So governance, so how are you actually governing the company? What transparency have you got around that governance? A really exciting recent initiative is looking at the Boardroom 2030, which is a very cool sort of looking at how you can get different viewpoints brought into that boardroom rather than it being sort of quite a closed and stagnant area. So can you have a voice for young people, suppliers, and really bringing some dynamism to the boardroom. It looks at the employees, so how much are you investing around your employees in terms of development, benefits packages, the diversity and inclusion around that. Very similar across to your supply chain, so where are you getting your products from, where's the biggest impact being made, and then looking at things like your emissions and the actual environmental impact and social impact of the business. So it's a pretty lengthy process. It starts with business BIA, which is your impact assessment, and anyone can do that, and it's completely free. So you can use that as a tool to sort of benchmark where you are at the moment. And then you can choose to go through the accreditation. It took us about 12 months to go through in total.
It sounds like a big effort. So congratulations on getting through that.
Thank you.
All right, so Adam, we'll come back to you. Data-driven sustainability, what does that mean from your perspective? You're a machine learning engineer, you've got data science background. How do you use those skills in a sustainability data-driven effort?
Yeah, well, so at Origami, like that is the product, that is what we're selling, with the ability to do that and do it easier and faster and enable traditional kind of trading teams to just get going with this stuff without having to upskill a load of data scientists and machine learning engineers and things like that to just make sense of it and trying to reconcile like sort of data in the tens of hertz with data in hourly and weekly blocks, right? Even that's like more difficult than the traditional sort of workflows and things. But I think Sara makes a really good point about benchmarking, and I think that's really, really important because from time as a consultant as well, we saw a lot of this. People trying to go too big too quickly, and I think using data, actually, like where are you now and where do you want to get to, can enable you to sort of stop yourself doing too much, because a lot of people maybe try something that's too big and they can't afford it, or they can't afford to complete it. You can always do better, right? Is my thought. You could always be doing better, right? You could be running additional things and planting millions of trees and all that, but you just might not be able to afford it, and you still have to make a profit. And I think it's really important to show that this isn't at the cost of your business. This is a part of your business, and making it sustainable for the environment, but sustainable for you as a company as well, I think is really, really important. But so yeah, using data to move away from these kind of hunchy kind of decisions that are such and such a company's doing this, so we're going to do this, to okay, what's within our sphere of influence? What's the next step on the path? What could we afford to do? And what kind of impact will that make? Oh, look, it looks like offsetting our carbon with planting trees. It isn't the most cost-effective thing we could do when we could put in a travel restriction or something like that. That might actually be the best way to start on that journey and progress down the path. So yeah, moving away, I always think data-driven to me just means moving away from gut feel and instinct in these decision-making sort of circles to measured, calculated steps down the path to sort of some sort of success.
That was great, a great answer. We've actually got a question in the Q&A box just now, so I think it's quite relevant at this point. I'll just ask it openly, and if you want to jump in, you can jump in. So the question is, I'm curious as to what green, for lack of a better word, companies expect or want from their staff in terms of sustainability and environmentally friendly practices, which I think is a really interesting point. How far, if you've got an ambition to be a green organisation, do you have to impact the behaviour of your individuals that actually work for you?
I would say 100%. They have to be on that journey with you. It's something that we embed all the way through the organisation. We have a reward bonus for green ideas. But I think I was going to say there's no point in heading on this direction, but it makes it so much more difficult if your team are not behind you. Throwing it out there in terms of our environment in a warehouse, if they put the heating on and left the doors open, then what's the point? It's so challenging. So I think for us, it's finding people that are committed to this outside of their working life. So they want to improve the world around them, and it's just part of the core and who they are. So I think it comes from personal motivation and just a willingness to sort of join a company on the journey and learn. And it's always about learning and sort of leading the company. I don't know everything about it, absolutely, but it's making those changes when you become aware of them. Adam mentioned something earlier which I thought was so true about, when you see other companies doing this and you think, oh my goodness, I've got to do that. LinkedIn is getting nearly as bad as Instagram for that. You think, oh my goodness, I haven't done this. But I think actually just knowing your team, working with them, getting them on board, sharing the vision, being open about where we're doing really well and being open about where we're not doing really well as a company, and just bringing the team along and creating that engaging environment is really crucial.
We actually had this this discussion one night after work at the pub with some of the guys in the team, and I think there's two sides of it. So I think we naturally attract these people that do care, so it's not much of an issue. It's not very we're not force feeding people this vision. Like they're coming to us, and actually I think we're attracting better talent and more and sort of a more interesting, more diverse range of people, because they want to be on this journey and they want to be a part of it. But some people, one of the quotes from this discussion we'd had was like, we can't all be vegan activists, like, and dedicate whole. And it's like, that's true. We're not going to force feed these people and make sure everyone's like signed up completely, and because that's what ultimately what you do outside of work should be up to you. We'd hope that we can help and encourage you and put you in a community of people that are going to inspire you to do stuff. And I think that there's a spectrum there, isn't there? And there's a threshold somewhere, and I'm not quite sure where it is. But yeah, if someone was like coming in and doing exactly like heating on, windows open, aircon, not really caring, and that would jar. That just would jar with the culture of the people that are there. And I think you'd stick out. But there's nothing mandated, or there's no top down, or it's got to be like this. It's an interesting way. It's much like a culture fit thing, I suppose. Like you would do an interview, but you would think, is this person a right fit for the culture? And it's just that has to be a part of the hiring, I guess.
I wonder if you're a green company, if you're making that part of it, you're basically saying this is our values, and we're going to hire people who align with our values, and that means that you don't have to press down and say you need to change your behaviour if you're going to be part of our organisation.
I would definitely agree that actually, like Adam said, I think when you put your head above the parapet, so to speak, and say this is, we are impact driven, we tend to find that it's impact-driven employees that are for candidates that end up coming to us for roles. And interestingly, I think I've seen two key things. I think COVID has sort of set that alarm bell working in terms of, why am I commuting from Edinburgh to London to go work for a company and do X, Y, Z, when I can actually find someone local that I can sort of embed my skills within, or even if you are remote, but that remote working, I think, has triggered the response that we can have employees all over. They don't have to be in the office every single day, and that I've seen a lot of sort of heartfelt moves. So I've been working for this amazing company. It is amazing, but it's not on the same sort of journey that I want to be on. So I think you do automatically attract those people. And I think, like Adam said, we've had a more diverse range of applicants, and we've also, I think, since we've been doing more and more openly around our initiatives, we're having more speculative. So we've got an increasing client base that we can actually, or candidate base, sorry, that we can actually refer to when we're creating the roles. So that's really interesting as well. But I think, again, that comes from making sure your vision is just really evident and you do what you say on the tin, so to speak.
It's an interesting point, because there's been a lot of talk about the Great Resignation and people realigning how they want to live their day-to-day life. Do they want the 9 to 5? Do they want something that's a lot more values driven? And maybe there's an opportunity here for organisations becoming more focused on their values and using that as a way to attract talent. Do you feel that's been the case for Healthy Nibbles?
Absolutely. I think we are drawing and attracting companies that want to work for companies that are doing better. Candidates that want to work for companies that are doing better. And I think that does make that cultural fit so much better, and the onboarding process, and at the end of the day, every employee is a representation of the company they work for. And I think it's, when they're so aligned to that, I think it's really, really valuable. And we're definitely seeing more of that transition. So it's a strong case.
Do you see that, Adam?
Yeah, well, look, I'd say it happened to me. So I absolutely loved my old job, my previous role, like through and through, 100%. And the role at Origami came up, and the technically really interesting, really aligned with what I wanted to do. But the fact that it was green energy, and that kind of aligned to my personal sort of ideals was a huge factor in the decision to actually leave where I was. So I can certainly see that. I think it's happening with customers as well. So when back as a consultant, we found a lot of organizations were actually like in their criteria for awarding, especially public bodies, in their criteria for awarding projects, there was like, are you aligned to our principles? And essentially that was like diversity and inclusion and being green and things like that. So it's becoming more and more important to the follow-on, like, again, it's back to profitability and making sure your business is keeping up with the times. I think a friend of mine who lectures in political philosophy was talking about how there's been a shift in consumerism towards, instead of like donating to charities as much, people now try and acquire some of that charitable good feeling through the products they're buying, and it's kind of been tied into what we're buying. And I think that's certainly happening with work as well, actually, that, well, I can do my job, I can be paid a fair wage, and I can contribute as well, then that's ticking more boxes for me, and I can roll all that into one because the options are out there to go and do it.
And what I love about all of this is if you build a group of people, whether it's an organisation or a community group or a family, and they are aligned in what they think is important, you can capture the creative energy and their diversity and the different ways they approach things, and you can build almost a virtuous cycle of things getting better because everybody's contributing and everybody's pushing in the same direction. Whereas if you have a more hierarchical approach, the person at the top has to be the one that's pushing change all the time, and that can be a big weight on leadership generally.
And it can come across like disingenuous and a bit exhausting as well if it's very top down and too much, and the middle kind of management and the people on the ground aren't feeling it as well. It can exhaust people.
Absolutely, it can. We've got another question in the Q&A, and I think this one is specifically for you, Sara. So what do you anticipate being the impacts on developing and least developed countries from shifting diets further towards local produce?
That's a really interesting one. And it's actually one that's quite close to my heart because I used to live in Africa, and I know that, a lot of produce, things like baobab and cacao, come in from those warmer climates. I think there's an awful lot of companies that where they are using it. At the end of the day, we don't grow cacao beans. cacao over here. Such a shame. So, but I think those products, they're not going to disappear from our diet. Let's face it, chocolate, aren't we the #1 chocolate eating country in the world or something? So we're definitely not going to get rid of it. But I think what we can do is we can make choices towards more sustainable brands. So organizations like Dozy and Dam, Willie's Cacao, where they're actually working with the cacao farmers. They know the plantations and they're able to do that responsibly. There's a brand called Aduna that works with women's groups and initiatives in Africa and sort of getting back into the localized economy. So I think if it's done well, it can be done, it can have a positive impact even though we are expending the emissions. I think overall we have to be moving towards a wider benefit for good rather than just siloed focus on individual things, because yes, if we removed all trade from those warmer climates, there would be a massive negative impact on those environments because they do rely a lot on us. So I think it's just about doing it more consciously and being more authentic in that trading, those trading agreements that are taking place.
It's almost a colonialism leftover, isn't it? We went down to the global south and we helped ourselves and changed their how they used their resources, changed their economy so they relied on us. And if we just pull out entirely now, then that's when we're not at that stage where that can work at this point.
No, I don't, not at all. And I think, as I say, I think it is just about choosing those brands wisely that you actually work with and align and you buy from. I think that's kind of the key thing that you do. And then, like I sort of mentioned earlier on in the conversation around, as a buyer of these products, we drive that sustainable supply message with our suppliers, so that we're really giving preference and position to those brands that are actually looking after their wider communities.
Do you want to add anything, Adam? I know it's very much Sara's expertise.
Yeah, no, I think it's vitally important, and I think Sarah's hit it on the nose. It's one of those things. It is a bit of a hangover from a previous era, and it's going to take a lot of unpicking. That's a difficult problem to fix. And again, kind of back to what I said, like big bang's not the right approach. Going all out, we can't really afford to do it, and the knock-on effects are probably too much. Doing something smaller and then sort of iterating there, I think probably is the way forward. And
of course, it's a pertinent question in the food and drink energy, but it's not lacking relevance in the energy industry either, with gas imports and oil being very geographically driven. So is that an aspect of that international aspect of energy, anything that Origami Energy has looked into?
Yeah, so the UK energy market's a really interesting one because of the interconnectors and things like that, and we're quite forward thinking. It's quite well developed from that point of view, but we are building this product for all energy markets. We do a lot of work with some stuff because as well, the UK, to understand what the price is going to be in the UK, you have to understand what we're going to be importing and exporting and things like that. So it's actually becomes one big system, and that's why it's such a difficult problem. But yeah, looking at other markets as well, like Germany has, Japan's got multiple energy markets and things like that. So when you start to look at that, you do have to develop a more global picture of actually what's being produced, where, and how it's being transported around. It's not something I've spent enough time on just yet, but it's definitely in the pipe.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be a difficult problem because it's complex, and the more different cultures you bring in, the more complex it becomes. So what I think I'd like to move on to at this point is the point of similarity between data-driven and sustainability, which to me is change management. It's about creating change. It's about identifying what change you want to make, and it's about working towards that change. So how important is it, do you think, to take a change management driven approach to lowering your environmental impact as an organisation? Sara?
I think it forms the basis of what you're actually doing. I mean, change management is essentially what all businesses are going to have to go through. We are facing an unprecedented time in terms of sustainability and the impact that we need to have on the planet. No single business, no single entity is going to be able to fix this. And the way that we can sort of adopt it and be the best that we can be is through a really sort of structured change management process within the business. And I think, again, as Adam and I have probably said before, it's about starting with where you're at and what you can change immediately, and then utilizing the data to be able to support those initiatives going forward and those practices that you're putting in place going forward. So yeah, absolutely crucial.
A lot of what you talked about in terms of your B Corp registration is going to help with that. Things like governance practices and pulling everything together into a sort of single initiative almost, where everything's linked up. Does that help?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So for us, B Corp was transformational. We thought, well, we always started going back to my past experience in Africa, where I'd seen this juxtaposition between poverty and wealth. When I came back to the UK, it was really about creating a business of purpose and creating a business that had impact. So I always came at that angle when we first started founding, and even when we had just one intern, that was just how we sort of embedded impact into the business. I think when I discovered the B Corp accreditation, what I did feel was it kind of embodied everything that we were hoping to do, and then some, and gave us that sort of framework. So we're going to use that going forward, and that is our ongoing framework. And it even goes back to when you're actually setting it up, you have to change your shareholders agreement, so that you're actually looking not just at the business profitably, as I've mentioned, but it's very purpose driven. So for us, it's going to use that framework to sort of consistently benchmark all of our actions across governance and across our employee engagement and supplier relations and the impact that we actually have on our community.
I don't think I could build on that answer. That was very good. Thank you. Adam, do you want to join in and talk a little bit about change management from your experience?
Yeah, so yeah, look, I think Sarah's spot on, and back to days as a consultant. I'm reading a book called Sooner, Safer, Happier at the moment, which is excellent, and it talks a lot about this. It's about adoption of like agile and lean working processes in bigger enterprise organizations, but a lot of the stuff they talk about is really, you could apply to this, right? And they say one of the big success stories they had was building communities of practice up before you try and sort of mandate change, and identifying the innovators and the people that want to do it, because you're always going to get resistance, right? You're always going to get people that don't want to change, because you're essentially saying, see, the way you've done your whole career's gone so far, that was kind of wrong and you need to change. So that isn't comfortable for people, but there are some people that are naturally ahead. So that was really interesting. And talking about centers of enablement instead of centers of excellence, and like basically core parts of an organization that help knock down barriers and hurdles for other people, but let it be very much a pull thing instead of a push thing. And yeah, look, as a consultant, you get what you measure, right? And helping people define KPIs was always one of the big headlines for me, was always you get what you measure. So make sure what you're measuring is important to you, because if you're going to start incentivizing people based on it, they'll start to game the system and things like that. So be very careful about what you're going to measure and what you're going to incentivize, and give yourself permission to fail as well. And the beauty of like a community of practice, or a wider community that extends outside your organization, is that other people's experiments can be learning opportunities for you. There's no such thing as a failed experiment. There's, as long as you always learn from them and you kind of document where you were. And you're probably a big believer in blogging and sharing that as much as possible, making it very public. Yeah, we tried this thing, it didn't quite work, and here's what we're trying next time. Those kinds of blogs are gold, and not many people post them, I think, because it's against the marketing spiel and such. But that stuff is absolute gold for others to go away and go, right, here's a thing we can build from and iterate our journey.
Absolutely. I mean, the Data Lab is an innovation centre, so innovation is core to all of the things that we're trying to promote, and everything that you spoke about there applies to innovation as it applies to becoming better at data, and as it applies to sustainability. It's not just about finding the good bits and then running after those. It can be about establishing a whole culture, which is part of why it's so difficult, isn't it?
We found as well that, like, you can, if I introduce a new technology to your organization and it does the job better, unless it's significantly easier than the way you used to do it, you'll probably end up going back to the way you used to do things. Like that would happen to be the case. And that's for technology that helps. If I'm saying here's a new process that's greener, that can just appear to be a barrier. So if you're making people's workday more difficult, or changing the way they do things too much, that can be really difficult for people to just naturally adopt and get on board with. So you have to be careful with that stuff.
Change is difficult. Sarah, do you have any techniques or approaches that you use when you're trying to bring change into your organisation?
I think for me, the biggest element is bringing the team on board on the journey, and the openness and transparency. Because, as Adam said, if you're going in and saying, actually, you did this way, now I want you to do it that way, you're going to be staying an hour later because we're going to basically throw a ton more work in your direction. It isn't going to be easier. So for us, if, for instance, it's a new supplier, we'll actually, I'll make sure they're introduced to them, that they've got an easier access to them, and just sort of making that process easy, rather than, right, I want you to use this supplier in X, go find them. It is about taking people on a journey with you. Absolutely, because, and I think the transparency around showing those changes that you're making. I think honesty, like Adam said, the social media element is it's no different on LinkedIn than it is on the sort of consumer side of things, where you see all the positive stories, you see all the, we've raised 70 million, we've done this, we've changed the world in this way, but actually, what do where did you do something that actually flunked completely, or wasn't embraced by the team, or whatever? Because it's those honest conversations that are actually going to help other companies. I think it's making sure that the little or the smaller elements that are taking, so like the travel scheme, or just being able to do things like make changes in our packaging and things like that, so showing people how easy it is. So last year we changed all our packaging to plastic free, and showing the new design of the box and seeing that in person gets the team excited, and they it's something for them to be proud of as well. So I think it's just that embracing the journey and the honesty and transparency all coming together that makes the change possible. Because it doesn't matter how much of the leader you scream and shout from the top, that's never ever going to work if everybody's not on the journey with you.
It's almost like you have to resource the change. You can't just say to somebody, right, change that in the next 5 minutes and then keep doing the rest of your workload. You have to say, okay, stop what you're doing. Let's investigate, let's communicate, let's understand how the change is going to impact you in your day-to-day job, and giving them space to learn that, become comfortable with it as they move forward. And I think that may be where some companies and organizations fall down with change. I think it's just a straightforward, they think it's a simple thing. So it's under-resourced. They haven't put enough information into it. Does that seem fair?
Providing resources as well around change. So, I'm a massive believer. There's a book called Atomic Habits, and it's all about those tiny, tiny marginal changes that you can make on a day-to-day. And then when you look back at it over 12 months, you've made such progress. And I think that is sort of, I would say, embedded in how I like to see the business. So what can we be doing? How can we be improving? And then let's do it together. Share where you failed, share where you've had a great win. Basically we spend so much of our time at work, we might, we need to sort of make that an engaging and the embracing environment. And, we're all going to have ups and downs, and we need to share those. And if something is problematic, if it's a change that we've implemented and it's difficult, then exploring ways to either lessen the blow or to make it, to find another alternative.
Brilliant. Do you have anything to add, Adam, on that?
I think really well said. The one thing that I think people lose, or I don't think realise, is the power of stories as well, right? And it's, again, goes back to like talking about KPIs with people and understandability. And I find, actually, even personally, tons of CO2, that doesn't mean a great deal to me. I don't know what a ton of CO2 feels like. But when that gets translated to 3 cars taken off the road, that becomes a more relatable thing for me personally. And I find that trying to see your impact, so like packaging is a great one, right? Because you can turn it into tons of plastic, like rubbish bags, swimming pools, whatever, that people get a good feel for. But having easily sort of like soundbitey almost stories that the people that you're changing the workload of can then go and tell down the pub or tell to their parents or whatever and their friends, be a bit proud of it in a way that they understand. That's probably going to get them on board quicker than some of these metrics that are maybe a little bit less real, a little bit less tangible to some people. Might just be needing to think there.
That's a really great point.
It absolutely is. I mean, we did some tree planting, and it wasn't just the trees that were planted. What really got me inspired around that was just how much food we're providing for a farming community and how many days work we'd given, and the fact that through this initiative we'd also planted fruit bearing trees, basically, so that it was providing fruit, and just seeing how many species it had also impacted in terms of insects and wildlife. And I think that it's about making this tangible, because I admit I have no engineering background, no data background. And when you look at the CO2, it's like, okay, great, we've done this, fabulous. What does that mean? And I think it is actually making that visual and tangible, because I would argue that leading a business in this space, if I can't grasp it, then our newest intern is definitely not going to be able to grasp it unless they've come from some impact and sustainability course or something, and then they might have a better understanding. But yeah, you need to make it relevant to everybody on your team and everybody on that journey with you, for everybody to want to be involved in it.
I wonder if we should sort of put our money where our mouth is just now. And we talked about, and we all endorsed the idea that you should share your failures. Perhaps we could share one failure that we've put in place that hasn't worked out as we expected it to, and you can talk. Well, I'll be kind. You can talk about something that's personal or something that's directly related to your business. I'll let you choose, but maybe we should start with something, putting our money where our mouth is, and actually stand up and say, yes, it doesn't always go right.
So yeah, so I was vegan for about 9 months. I thought I'd try it after reading some stuff, and I went big bang and just went all out. And one of the drivers for me was thinking that it would force me into cooking more like raw food, things like that. Like raw ingredients, sorry, not raw food specifically, but raw ingredients, and going down that route and eating a bit healthier. And I thought that's great, and I really enjoyed it. I really got into the habit of it. And but then like the vegan sausage roll came out and things like that, and there was like a boom about 2 years ago, of like all of a sudden I could get all the junk food in plastic packaging that I was kind of semi-addicted to in the past to just in vegan. And it was like I kind of felt I'd very quickly abandoned some of these more positive like practices and to fall into bad old habits. And actually I took a break from doing it over Christmas because there was a bit of I didn't want to be that person going around to everyone's house going, oh, by the way, I'm vegan, can I have some sort of special treatment? And then never got back into the habit of it. And I think it's one of those things that, as it wasn't significantly easier than the default, it took a lot of energy to go into. And I feel guilt about this all the time because I still feel like I can do it. I enjoy doing it. I need to go back to doing it. So yeah, I suppose that's a bit of a failed experiment on my behalf, and I need to maybe sort of surround myself with a bigger community of people or whatever that's going to help keep me in check for that stuff.
That was a great example. Thanks for sharing that story, Adam.
I am trying to rack my brains about maybe I'm just not done enough.
Well, you've been really successful.
I tried last year to do a bit of a change management in how I manage my data projects for the Data Lab data science team. I asked a couple of people in the data lab to be my sort of internal governance board, and actually I tried to set up a sprint thing where every 3 months we'd come in and the whole pipeline would be assessed with a strategic view, and the individual projects would be looked up against the resource that we had available that quarter. And it was a great plan. It was a really great plan, and it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work might be partly to do with COVID, might be partly to do with just the realities of working at a place like the Data Lab with a relatively small amount of resource available for these things. In practice, we haven't in the year since I tried to set this up, we never got to the point where we had sufficient in the pipeline, sufficient that it was worth putting that whole process together and working it out. So it just didn't work. It was a change. It was a great idea behind it. Just in practice, never came through. Didn't work for us. So
I'm trying to think what we've actually, just in terms of, I feel in some respects that we're at the very early stages. So we're probably going to fall flat on our face as we move forward on all of this. But I feel that almost with, so whilst we've always been impact driven, I think it took us till last year to really go through that B Corp process and sort of start to really put the data around that. I think things that we certainly could have done better is actually start earlier, and I think we could have been more transparent earlier around what we were actually doing. We do seem to have a very sort of, and actually I think this is probably an experience for any SME out there. If you are doing something, just be public about it and just share it, because it does encourage the light under the bushel sort of scenario, that we were doing all this great stuff that people would compliment on, but then we weren't sharing it and we weren't sort of making that public. But I think last year for us was a big sort of transition where we actually wanted to make sure that what we were doing was documented in a sort of really clear and easy to understand way, which we've actually then launched on the website and things. I feel that where we're probably going to see where things have come unstuck, or where we've not done enough detail, or we've not dug enough in terms of what we're doing enough, will start to come as we start to review, and we're just about to go into preparing our 2021, what have we actually done, and have we met those, I think it's just sort of, just sort of ongoing and just being more sort of like transparent about things. I think we could have done that better.
That's a good example. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And we've got another question on the Q&A, but we're also approaching 11 o'clock, so we're going to look to start winding this up shortly. So if we can do this quite reasonably briefly, and I'll give you a final question to finish us up. So the question from the Q&A, are there any sustainable companies that Sara and Adam admire in particular? Who's doing this right?
I absolutely love Patagonia and Chantecaille. So Patagonia for their outdoor clothing, they were one of the founding companies within the B Corp. I like the way that they engage the supply chain. I like the products that they've got on offer, and I like the way they sort of tailor it to their community, but also all the work that goes in around that. And Chantecaille, which is a beauty brand, and just how engaged they are about the world around them and the impact, removing all the nasties out of makeup and cosmetics, making sure that the product is still amazing quality, but also they're giving back to so many different communities around the world and protecting endangered species. I think they are really, really transparent brands. A lot of respect for both of those.
Adam?
Yeah, I'll go with the example from earlier. MacArthur Green are a Glasgow-based environmental consultancy, and they've been carbon negative for years and years, but long before it was kind of in the zeitgeist. Do some really interesting stuff, and I'm pretty sure the CEO does do talks occasionally on how they approached it and what they've done, and kind of help enable other companies. So we're worth checking out some of their the stuff they're putting out.
Brilliant. All right, so a few minutes left to go. Let's finish with some recommendations. So we've talked about how Healthy Nibbles, Origami Energy, already on the journey towards a more sustainable practice and incorporating data and impact measurement in that. What sort of recommendations based on your experience would you give to an organisation who's a bit earlier in that journey? Adam, would you like to start?
I would say almost crowdsource the ideas and get people within the organisation to suggest things and figure out what's going to get excitement and what's not. It's all well and good going and picking a thing that you think is really good, but you might find that all your staff really care about one aspect more than something else. And if it comes from people in the organisation, it's going to get traction quicker and sooner because you've got natural champions there. So I would say that there's so many great ideas and so many small things you can do that make a difference. Maybe trying to find out what people really care about already is the way forward, because you'll start to build that community within your own company.
Thank you very much. That's a really good start. Sara, do you have anything to add?
I would say know what your starting point is. There's really great tools like Compare Your Footprint, which is able to sort of fairly inexpensively talk you through and take you through where your actual carbon footprint is. And looking at your business, exactly like Adam's saying. So for us, one of the things that we found, part of our solution includes vending machines and wellness hubs that are dotted around the country. And we use data then to know when to go restock. What that means actually is we're doing less refills than would typically be on a vending route, who just typically go around and sort of do a weekly drop. So I would say that, that for us was a win. So it's about knowing your business and knowing what you can do. For us, that and plastic-free packaging and the traveling side were the biggest elements of impact. Obviously, COVID stimulated the working from home. And if you look at a lot of the different graphs around emissions, that cars on the road, that is the biggest, one of the biggest drivers. So just look at all of those different options that, where you as a business actually impact, and see which areas are the best to change.
That's brilliant. So we're now just at the hour. So thank you very much for joining us for today's panel on innovation and thriving in a data-driven sustainability effort. I hope that everybody listening, either here today live or later on in the recording, will get something away from this, because I feel like it's a very important topic, and there's lots of spaces where us as individuals and us as organisations can really be part of the solution, and lots of spaces where the planet needs us to be part of the solution, whether it's lowering our carbon emissions, whether it's promoting biodiversity, whether it's reducing our pollution and littering efforts in the planet. Lots of spaces where we can do things better and where we need to do things better. So let me thank our panelists once again for joining us today. Thank you very much for listeners, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.